Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. Settle in and listen well. The Fortunate Fall, or How a Young Man Died of a Sermon and Lived to Speak of It. It must be said, in fairness to all parties, that the evening did not begin with anyone expecting a funeral. The room was packed with the faithful, the curious, and a handful who had simply wandered in for the bread. Lamps burned in every nook and cranny. Someone had supplied enough oil to illuminate a modest palace, and the effect was a room that glowed like a kiln and breathed like a sleeping ox. The warmth was tremendous. One could have baked flatbread on the windowsill. Into this golden, stifling furnace stepped Paul of Cilicia, a man who had survived shipwrecks, stonings, and 3 days adrift on the open sea, and who now faced the one challenge that no apostle has ever fully mastered, keeping a roomful of well-fed people conscious past midnight. He had a great deal to say, and he intended to say every syllable of it. Now, perched in the window of this third-story room, with one leg dangling cheerfully over a rather significant drop, sat a young man named Eutychus. The name in the common tongue means fortunate. It would prove, in rapid succession, spectacularly ironic, and then spectacularly true. Eutychus had chosen the window for reasons any sensible person would approve. The night air offered merciful relief from the warmth of 60 bodies and several dozen lamps, all conducting a quiet, unified campaign against the room's remaining oxygen. It was a reasonable position, comfortable even, a refreshing breeze on the neck, and an excellent view of the stars. It was also, as the next hour would make devastatingly plain, the most dangerous seat in the house. Paul, it must be understood, was not a man disposed toward brevity. He had survived a blinding encounter with the risen Christ on the road to Damascus, been caught up to the third heaven for reasons he never fully explained, and received enough lashings to furnish a small encyclopedia of scars. When such a man opens his mouth to preach on his last night in town, he does not glance at a sundial. He preached the way a man pours water during a drought, without pausing to measure what remains in the jug. Midnight arrived and departed, like a shy guest who sees no opening in the conversation. Meanwhile, Eutychus was losing his private war with gravity. His eyelids had grown heavy as rain-soaked canvas. His head nodded forward, recovered, nodded again. The lamps swam and flickered. Paul's voice, earnest and relentless and wonderfully certain, became a kind of warm river, carrying the young man steadily further from the shore of wakefulness. He was not lazy. He was not rebellious. He was a body fashioned from dust, sitting in a warm room long past the hour when dust prefers to lie down. The spirit was willing, as another group of drowsy friends once demonstrated in a moonlit garden. The flesh was melting like candle wax. And here is the thing about windows. A window is a threshold, neither fully inside nor fully outside, half committed to the room, half courting the night. It is the seat of the person who wants the warmth of the fellowship and the cool of the world, who desires belonging without entirely surrendering the option of retreat. The most dangerous seat in any room is the one between belonging and departure, the edge where you can feel the breeze and still claim to be inside. What happened next required perhaps 2 heartbeats and changed everything. Eutychus, overcome at last by the warm conspiracy of lamps and lateness, tilted. The night air, which had been his friend, became his executioner. 3 stories of empty darkness opened beneath him, and then there was only the sound that no one in that room would ever stop hearing. Luke, the physician who recorded these events, does not soften the report. He does not write that the young man appeared lifeless or seemed to have fainted. He writes, with the plain precision of a man who knows the difference, that Eutychus was taken up dead. The fall killed him. The laughter of the evening died with him. 60 people stood frozen in the lamplight, some already wailing, the bread still unbroken on its cloth, and a young man's body broken on the stones 3 floors below. Here is where the story sheds its comic garments and stands before you in the terrible dignity of the gospel itself. Paul did not panic. Panic is the creed of those who believe death is sovereign, and Paul believed nothing of the sort. He descended 3 flights of stairs with the unhurried calm of a man who has spoken face to face with the risen Lord and knows precisely who holds the final word over every grave in the world. He reached the body. He fell upon it, wrapping his arms around the still, shattered frame of the young man who had tumbled out of the sermon and out of the world entirely. This embrace was not medicine. It was an echo so ancient it rumbled through the whole spine of Scripture. Elijah had stretched himself upon the widow's dead son. Elisha had pressed his living flesh against the cold child from Shunem. Now Paul, heir of the prophets, fell upon a dead youth in a foreign street and did what the servants of God have always done. He went down to where the broken lay. The strong stooped to the shattered, the living pressed himself against the dead. Wholeness met the broken, and in that embrace lived the shadow of a far greater descent. For the one who was above all things once came all the way down, took on our flesh, and held our death against his chest, so that we might share his life. The word that seems to put you to sleep is the very word that raises you from the dead. Then Paul spoke. "Do not trouble yourselves," he said, with the calm and slightly impolite certainty of a man delivering settled news from heaven. His life is in him, not might be in him, not let us hope for the best. His life is in him, a declaration, not a diagnosis, spoken with the same authority Jesus used when he told a roomful of mourners at Jairus' house that their weeping was premature. Death was being shown the door, and it had no grounds for appeal. And death, having no grounds, left. What followed would strain belief if it were not attested by a physician standing in the room. Paul walked back upstairs. He broke the bread that had waited all evening. He ate. And then, with the magnificent persistence of a man who has just raised a corpse and sees no reason to shorten the program, he resumed talking. He talked until dawn. The sermon continued, the bread made its rounds, and the congregation, who had been screaming in the street not half an hour before, found themselves sitting once again in that golden lamplight, chewing slowly, and listening and gradually understanding that they had just watched the entire gospel performed before their eyes. A man fell, a man died, someone came down, someone embraced the broken, life was spoken into silence, and then the meal went on. This is the church when it is most truly itself. Not a tidy assembly immune to disaster, but a company of the drowsy and the fallen, where death is permitted to walk in. Precisely so, it can be walked back out again by the power of a God who does not prevent the fall, but answers it with resurrection. When morning came at last, gold and pale over the rooftops of the city, They brought the young man in alive. Not back to the window, not to the edge where he had perched between commitment and the cool night air. They brought him in, into the centre, into the company and the bread, and into the stunned and joyful laughter of those who have watched a dead man open his eyes. Luke, with sly understatement, records simply that they were not a little comforted. Eutychus, the fortunate one, had discovered at last what his name truly meant. Fortune is not the man who never falls. Fortune is the man who falls into the arms of a God who comes downstairs. The sermon was not over. The bread had not run out. The lamps were still burning. And the one who descends to where the broken lie was already on his way down. Selah.